Thank you for joining us for today's program. This program is going to have a live Spanish interpretation. For more information on how to use this function, I'm going to hand it over to our interpreter, Pamela Perales.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Pamela Perales y yo soy la intérprete de español. Este webinar va a tener los servicios de interpretación al español en simultáneo. Para acceder al canal de español, en unos momentos, usted va a poder encontrar el icono de un globo terráqueo en la barra de herramientas en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Al darle clic al icono del globo terráqueo, usted va a tener la oportunidad de seleccionar su idioma de preferencia. Si está usando una tableta o un dispositivo móvil, le aparecerá el icono de 3 puntos suspensivos y al igual podrá seleccionar su idioma de preferencia. Albert, I'm ready to be assigned as the interpreter. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. The Contra Costa County Library is happy to connect you with our resources, services, and materials at all 26 of our branches. Access more than 1 million physical items, including international language collections, and thousands of digital materials 24/7 at ccclib.org. Visit any library to use our public computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi. You can also visit one of our branches with laptops for on-site use or check out a Wi-Fi hotspot for 3 weeks. Contra Costa County Library's adult literacy program trains and supports volunteer tutors to deliver basic literacy instruction to adults throughout the county. Visit our website and sign up for a digital library card today. I'm now going to hand it over to Madeline Cronenberg.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Madeline Cronenberg, and on behalf of the Contra Costa County Library and Contra Costa County TV, welcome to our community conversation webinar, Standing Up to Hate. I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. This is a Zoom webinar, so the audience microphones are all muted and videos are turned off. If you have any questions for the moderator or the panelists, please submit them using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. A member of our team will share your questions with the moderator during the Q&A portion of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and at the end of the program, it will be posted on the YouTube channels of the Contra Costa County Library and the League of Women Voters Diablo Valley. Site addresses of the YouTube channels will be displayed on the screen at the end of the program. Additionally, Contra Costa Television is broadcasting this. The dates and times will be posted on your screen at the end of the webinar. Contra Costa Television is also available to watch on Comcast Channel 27, AT&T UVerse Channel 99, Astound Channel 32, and online at ContraCostaTV.org. We will also post the contact information for our panelists in the date and subject of our next community conversation at the end of this program. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and to ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. We empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy, education, and litigation at the local, state, and national levels. We encourage you to join the League of Women Voters and to be a part of our work. You can join the League by visiting lwvc.org/join. The League of Women Voters of the United States believes in the individual liberties guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. The League is convinced that individual rights now protected by the Constitution should not be weakened or abridged. Individual liberties have been a long-standing central League principle. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Mary Taylor.
Hey, thank you very much, Madeline. Hate crimes are increasing exponentially in California. We look forward to discussing what constitutes a hate crime and the steps being taken to address them, and how we as a community support victims of hate crimes. We are very fortunate to have the expertise of 3 outstanding and accomplished panelists who will provide timely and important information and explain what resources and support are available to the community. All participants of the webinar will receive a copy of the resources available at the end of the webinar. Each of our panelists will share data and pertinent information, and after all have presented, we will open it up for questions, and I'll remind you at that time how you can post questions. Our 3 panelists today are Simon O'Connell, Chief Assistant District Attorney from the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office, and Walnut Creek Police Chief Jamie Knox, and Becky Monroe, California Civil Rights Department, who will provide our first presentation. Becky L. Monroe is the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives for California Civil Rights Department and has worked as a civil rights attorney for over 20 years with a focus on hate crimes. Before moving to California, she led the Fighting Hate and Bias program for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a national coalition of more than 200 civil rights organizations in Washington, D.C. And she also started the Stop the Hate Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. She also served as director of the Divided Communities Project at Ohio State's Moritz College of Law. In 2009, Monroe was appointed by President Obama to work for the US DOJ through the end of his administration in 2017. She led the United States DOJ's Community Relations Service and then served as Director of Policy and Senior Counselor in the US DOJ's Civil Rights Division. She was on detail as Senior Policy Advisor for the White House Domestic Policy Council on Civil Rights Issues from 2014 to 2015. Before joining the administration, Monroe was a legal services lawyer representing low-wage immigrant workers and people trafficked for labor. Please welcome Becky L. Monroe, Deputy Director for Strategic Initiatives and External Affairs, California Civil Rights Department.
Thank you so much, Mary. It is such a pleasure to be here with you in this conversation. And I really want to thank the Contra Costa County Library, as well as the League of Women Voters. I know from my work in civil rights that in order to make our country stronger and more just, we need organizations like yours. And I know that both the library and the League do a lot of work to make us more just. And I also have to say how excited I am to be on with the County Attorney's Office and the Police Department. In doing this work, both in California and across the country, having public safety agencies that are so committed to combating hate that they're willing to come and talk in these forums is a really great sign. So thank you. And I think if we can, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. Great. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about a new resource we have through the California Civil Rights Department. And I also want to make sure you know about how to access those resources and also how we may be able to support community-based organizations, as well as potentially some of the law enforcement agencies that may be calling in as well. So I talk here about earning trust and combating hate. We recognize it is our obligation to earn trust as a government services agency. And so part of what we are trying to do is to earn that by providing the services that people need. So go to the next slide, please. This is just our disclaimer. I am an attorney after all, so I will, we can keep going. I wanted to start out, I'm going to talk a little bit about California versus Hate, which is a really exciting statewide initiative. We just had the official launch on May the 4th. But what I wanted to really make clear is that this is a part of the Civil Rights Department. We are the civil rights agency that enforces civil rights laws in our state. We protect people from unlawful discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, as well as civil claims related to hate, violence, and human trafficking. I emphasize this because we recognize that hate does not happen in a vacuum. When we have a state where we have active enforcement of civil rights protections across the board, we are more likely to create a climate where we will not be having an increase in acts of hate. So next slide, please. So today I'm just going to go through 3 major points with you. One is I want to talk about our comprehensive approach to combating hate. So again, how is it that we in California see responding to acts of hate, hate crimes and hate incidents? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that distinction. How do we do that more broadly? The resource line, the network, how do you access support? What's the best way to get to us if you need to reach us? And then finally, we want to give specific resources to partners, to community-based organizations, to local governments, and to others that may be trying to get out information about combating hate. So next slide, please. Thank you. So, and again here, what I wanted to emphasize is this is from one of our campaigns that was about more broad general civil rights protections around housing and employment. And again, we see that this all is part of a continuum, and that's something we need to address across the board. And the next slide, please. So we enforce a whole host of civil rights laws at the Civil Rights Department. The Unruh Civil Rights Act, which deals with public accommodations, meaning if you're using any kind of public accommodation and they're discriminated against, which could mean going to a restaurant, hotel. The Fair Employment and Housing Act, which is just what it sounds like. It's enforcing anti-discrimination provisions in employment and housing. The Equal Pay Act, we're really proud of our work in this space. We host the largest in the country pay data reporting portal to make sure that people are paid equitably and fairly. The Disabled Persons Act, which is really critical, and I highlight that here because when we talk about hate crimes, it's important that we think about people who are targeted on the basis of disability. Human trafficking, we handle civil claims for damages, as well as some recipients for state funding. So this is helps protect individuals who may be targeted for discrimination by any recipient of state funding. So by an agency or another that has that state funding, they have to make sure they're not providing services in a discriminatory way. And then finally, the Ralph Act, which is a little known but really important act in California where you can actually get civil claims, meaning you don't go through the criminal legal system to recover if you are targeted for hate. Next slide. I also wanted to share that we are the host of the Commission on the State of Hate. We have public meetings, and I would strongly encourage folks who are interested in this issue and who want to weigh in on sort of how this policy is being developed to join those meetings. I believe our next meeting will be next week, so you're welcome to join. We are supporting the 9-member statewide commission. The members were appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, the Senate Committee on Rules. It's a tremendous group of people. I can say I've worked with them. Some of them I've worked with before, and now through this process, we have extraordinary expertise from across the state. And this commission is trying to help to address, to develop a more comprehensive accounting of hate activity. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to do that work as well. We'll host community forums, as I mentioned, and really try to provide resources and guidance. So they need to hear from you as well. Next slide. And my last sort of like plug for other resources that we have at the Civil Rights Department is to share about the Community Conflict Resolution Team. This team is somewhat modeled on a team that I led when I was at the U.S. Department of Justice, the Community Relations Service. Its whole model is something I think will resonate with a lot of people who are tuning in here because of the nature of who's hosting this meeting. The model is based on a recognition that the wisdom to address civil rights issues resides in communities. And part of what a government needs to do is to make sure that people in the community, leaders in the community, are at the table to address how to really more systematically address issues around civil rights. So we come in when there's tension, maybe in the aftermath of a hate crime, or perhaps a police-involved shooting, or another place where there's tension. And we work with law enforcement, we work with city officials, we work with community leaders to make sure that people are at the table. We help them to sort of think about how do you effectively resolve conflict. We can help to provide very practical services on if you're going to have a town hall, what's a productive town hall look like? How do you come out of those with action steps where you can help to make a more systemic difference? So next slide, please. So this is what I'm excited to introduce you to our California versus Hate resource line and network. It's a bit of a mouthful, but at the end of the day, what we want you to remember is that there is support when you report. So if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to share a little bit about what this line does. It is a community-centered approach to combating hate, meaning a few different things. If you reach out to us by phone or online, we will help people identify their options and next steps if you're targeted for hate. One of the things that's really important, and I think I'm really happy the county attorney is here because they're going to give you some more information about what constitutes a hate crime, how do you prove a hate crime. One of the things about calling us is that you don't have to know if what happened to you was a crime, or if it was an incident, or if it was another act of discrimination. All you have to know is that you were targeted for hate, and we can help identify different options for you. Some may want to go to law enforcement, and we've already had calls where people had already reported to law enforcement and they were just looking for some support and following up. Others may not feel comfortable going to law enforcement, and that's okay. We understand that, and we can still connect you with culturally competent resources. That's the second piece. We have now a statewide network of agencies across the state that can provide in language, culturally competent resources, and that could look like mental health support, legal services sometimes. It may be other sort of social services that people need access to. I know in working with people targeted for hate, their needs can really vary. It can be as something like making sure that they feel safe getting their kids to school, to sometimes people have food insecurity issues because they don't feel safe going to work. So there's a whole host of areas where we may be able to provide support. We also are really trying to improve hate incident and hate crime reporting and data. One of the things I worked on when I was at the US Department of Justice was trying to improve the FBI's reporting on hate crimes. That data, the FBI data, is dependent on law enforcement agencies across the state reporting hate crimes. That data, while it was really important, it could provide us some understanding of trends. And I think, anyone who's been sort of seeing what's happening in the country, you will see a trend where we are seeing a dramatic increase in reports of hate. All important, but also we know it's dramatically underreported. How do we know that? Part of it is just from the lived experience of people who have been targeted for hate and say they don't feel safe reporting. Some of it's actually from data that we have from the Department of Justice. So the US Department of Justice generally finds between 8 and maybe sometimes 10,000 hate crimes across the country in a year. That's what's reported by law enforcement. That's what you'll hear in something called the Uniform Crime Reports. The same Department of Justice, just a different part, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, they do a survey where they do a statistically significant survey to understand from victims' perspectives how many people have been targeted for hate. And in those cases, we see the number is closer to 250,000. So that is, as we would say, not a rounding error. That is an issue in terms of building trust. So when people come to report to us, we are going to report if someone reports an act of hate that is a hate crime under the definition of a hate crime, and again, it's based on what they report, or a hate incident. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because this is something you may hear about. I know part of my other work is to work with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I work with their civil rights subcommittee. I know for law enforcement, it can be challenging because sometimes someone will report an act of hate and it's not a crime. And there's a desire to sort of figure out how do we still support that person. What's important is here, our resource line, you can be supported regardless if you are a victim of a crime or an incident. A crime is, as it sounds like, it's a bias motivated crime. There's a crime and it was motivated by an act of bias against someone on the basis of what we call a protected category. That includes race, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, disability. You can include other categories as well, but that is sort of the heart of what a hate crime is. We define hate incidents as there's two kinds of hate incidents. One is a violation of civil rights law. So maybe it's a violation of a civil rights law, doesn't rise to the level of a crime, still a violation of the law, could still be addressed in court. The other are acts of hate that don't rise to the level of a crime, may not be a violation of law, but still cause harm. We can help support on all of those. And that's why when I'm working with law enforcement, I encourage them to send people to us, because I know for many officers who want to support their community, if they feel like they cannot, they can't respond because it's not in their jurisdiction, this is something that they can offer that provides real help. And we also make sure that the people who are taking the calls have ongoing training on cultural competence, and we are expanding the network to include more culturally specific organizations. So we have wonderful partners across the state, and we're always growing them. Next slide. So again, we've got trauma-informed services in over 200 languages if people call. There's the number 833-8-NO-HATE that is available. The phone line is available with a civil rights agent from 9 to 6 during the week. If you call after that time, you can connect to 211 that will then sort of take some relevant information and make sure you get a call back from a civil rights agent. If you go online, we have the form in 15 languages. You can submit online, and if you would like, you can get a call back. And again, we're lucky to partner with a 211 statewide network of agents and care coordinators. We do have this separate number to try and reduce wait times. We know that was a concern we heard, and we want people to know that if you call that number between 9 and 6, your wait should be no longer than 3 minutes. And I think we can go to the next slide, please. So just to give people a sense of what will happen if you call, you will get a short in-language processing for phone calls. So you'll have a call, and there'll be a relatively short conversation to get the key facts of what happened and what you would like. Are you interested in follow-up services? If you are, we will then call back and provide what we're calling care coordination services. That means we aren't just going to give you 5 referrals and say good luck. We will give you ideas of where to reach out to, and then we can say, do you want us to get on the phone with you right now and see if they can help? Or you can call us back. You will have contact information for us. If you're not hearing back from who you need to hear from at those agencies that are supposed to be helping, we can help to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we've helped in cases where maybe somebody was nervous about reaching out to law enforcement after a case had been filed, and we can help them to navigate that process as well. And again, online, we have an intake portal, and the portal itself is shorter with a longer in-language follow-up call if you ask for it. If you don't want it, we won't call you. It's up to you. You don't have to provide your name if you don't want to, but if you are interested in follow-up services, we can provide them. And next slide, please. And again, we'll let people know what your options are. It could be civil or criminal legal action. We'll help explain what that looks like. And wherever possible, we connect people with culturally competent community-based organizations. We recognize that often the people best situated to provide services are in the community. We are also, just so you know, entering into small contracts with a lot of those agencies to make sure that we're recognizing the work that they're doing if they're helping to provide services. Next slide. See, move to the next, there, thank you. And I'm just sharing here so you know kind of who's providing these resources when you call. We are working with both 211 LA and the statewide network. We've provided additional training on LA, on California versus hate. We're learning a lot from our colleagues in LA County. They created LA versus hate a couple of years ago, and they've really developed a fantastic reporting line there. Next slide. As I mentioned, privacy and confidentiality are very important. People can report anonymously, or they can share additional information if they choose. And regardless, we will not disclose identity to anyone without their permission. The only exception, and we say this to make it clear, if there's a report of child abuse, elder abuse, or activities indicating an imminent risk of violence. Next slide. And we are trying to hold ourselves accountable. We have contracts with community-based organizations that we're providing. Part of those contracts is for them to provide us with critical feedback. This is working, this isn't. These are the resources that we need access to. Next slide. And here I wanted to sort of point out for any organizations, including League of Women Voters, the library, anyone else, we have these free and customizable different content points for advocates, local governments. There's social graphics, posters and flyers. We have them in multiple languages. You can basically, we made it easy for people to customize them. So you can put your name on them if you want, to get the word out about combating hate if you want to support it in that way. Part of what we know with California versus Hate is we need to do a better job of reaching communities who feel like they haven't had an option before. So we're hoping that by providing free access at this website, if you look at partner resources, you can access those. We have a way to get a free Canva account so you can actually develop them for your own organization as well. I think next slide. And that is it. So I look forward to any questions. And again, it's so exciting to be on a call in a county and in an area where you've got leaders who are really committed to this work. So thank you.
Well, Becky, thank you so very, very much. And we really appreciate the state of California launching the California versus Hate program in time for this webinar. So thank you. And next, we're going to hear from Simon O'Connell, Chief Assistant District Attorney, Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office. Simon is the Chief Assistant District Attorney for Contra Costa County, a graduate of Boston College and Santa Clara University School of Law. Simon joined the District Attorney's Office in 2005. He's tried a number of high-profile cases in the county, and for his work in the homicide unit, Simon was recognized as the Contra Costa Felony Prosecutor of the Year in 2015. In addition to being a highly experienced trial attorney, Simon possesses extensive experience teaching on a variety of legal topics. He's presented on hate crime prosecution for the Department of Justice and the FBI, as well as local law enforcement agencies. Having prosecuted several not guilty by reason of insanity cases, Simon serves as an annual guest prosecutor with UCSF Medical School's Psychiatry and the Law Fellowship Program. In 2018, Simon was elevated to the District Attorney's Executive Management Team overseeing the Central and Eastern Prosecutions Branch. In August of 2021, he was promoted to his current position as Chief Assistant District Attorney. Please welcome Simon O'Connell.
Good afternoon, and Mary, thank you so much. I must say I am thrilled to be here, and on behalf of Dinah Becton, the District Attorney for Contra Costa, it's my pleasure to join with the League of Women Voters and the Contra Costa Library in order to have such a timely conversation about standing up to hate. And if I could begin with my first slide, I'll go ahead and get into a couple of things that were touched upon by Becky. And I think the first and most important part of this is really and truly lived experience. Oftentimes when a hate crime happens and a community is concerned about the vulnerability of the survivor and what has transpired within their protected class, the first question that is often asked of the prosecutor's office by those inquiring of the news is, how can this happen in the Bay Area? And that is sort of predicated on somewhat of a false sense of security, that we live in a very diverse and what we hope is open part of the country, in which we take great pride in individualism and the identity of those among us who are different from one another, and that we should be embracing it. And sometimes that can be a crux, and it's an easy way for us to avoid difficult conversations. And so I thank the League of Women Voters for bringing us together to have what sometimes is a difficult conversation for people, to talk about our individual vulnerabilities. As I tell my children, we are 99% the same. And it's that 1% difference in our DNA that causes so much pain and suffering and ignorant harm to one another. And so with that sort of kickoff, I want to move on to the next slide, in which California identifies, and I can start with the next one after this. In California, we have a very robust hate crime definition of protected classes. And there are 7 protected classes. We commonly think of race, religion, and sexual orientation, but there are 2 others which are of extreme importance in which we have seen and hate crimes. That's disability. And California is a leader in the nation in recognizing that in addition to gender and ethnicity and religion, that a disability is also a protected characteristic for which an individual can be harmed. And we are familiar with many laws outside of California, which are questioning and changing identity and sexual orientation and sexual identification. And California has long recognized our LGBTQ plus communities as being a protected class. The 7th one, which I think is extremely critical, that oftentimes can be overlooked, is association with that protected class or characteristic. And let me give you an example of that. If I have a child who is transgender, and in support of my child, I participate in a pride parade. And as I'm walking in that pride parade, a slur is sent in my direction and a rock is thrown at me, which strikes me in the head. As Becky indicated, there are some distinctions that are made between hate crimes and hate incidents. And a hate crime is a crime which is committed in which bias was a substantial motivation. And I think we can all see from the simple hypothetical given there that if a rock is thrown at me with a slur directed towards me, that is a hate crime that's occurring. The question becomes, if I am not of that protected class, that I myself am not somebody who identifies as trans, has that crime been committed? And that's where the catch-all in California comes into play, that because I'm in association with or in support of or with someone who's from that protected class, I too could be a victim. The same could be said if I was going to a place of worship with friends of mine who were Sikh, and I went to their temple, and on the way out of the temple, I was attacked for participating in that religious service. Myself, along with the other individuals who would have been assaulted or harmed, would all be victims and survivors of those crimes. And I think that's oftentimes an overlooked area, and I'm sure Chief Knox will be speaking about the ways in which law enforcement investigates and asks questions of victims as we take in information in order to make a determination as to whether or not the individual was perceived to be of a protected class. Finally, on this slide, we often see individuals who are misidentified. Unfortunately, in 2019, there was an assault of a Sikh gentleman who was on his way to religious services in West County. He was attacked by a group of individuals who exited a truck and began to assault him over the overpass on I-80. And they perceived him to be an individual of Islamic faith and made slurs in his direction as they assaulted him. Again, California's law does not protect the ignorance of the defendant who was targeting that individual based upon a perceived, though incorrect, classification of his ethnicity and religion. So with that sort of structure as a beginning, let's move to the next slide. Becky spoke of lived experience, and she also spoke of UCR reporting. And I wanted to share with you the statistics for Contra Costa County of hate crimes. because the lived experience told us that in some point in 2019, we were hearing of more individuals who were reporting hate crimes. And let me begin by saying I think that's extremely positive. That means that people are feeling reinforced amongst law enforcement and their communities, their neighbors and their friends to say, I can stand up, I can feel comfortable reporting what is my individual identity, whether that's my faith, my ethnicity, my sexual orientation. And those are incredibly vulnerable things for individuals to want to discuss, especially with somebody who may be outside of that comfort zone. And so we began to see an upward trend of significance in hate crimes that were being referred to the district attorney's office. And while I agree with Becky that there's definitely underreporting that goes on, the fact that referrals of greater size were being made to us, it is a positive in the fact that we know more people are feeling comfortable making these reports and having them documented. Of concern, though, is the rise in the number of cases which are being reported to our office. And that reflects on the lived experience that people are increasingly feeling targeted based upon their protected class. And so as one can see, the referrals from 2018 to 2019 jumped 100%. And then a massive spike in 2020 of a twofold increase. And we've been consistent, relatively speaking, between 2020 and 2021 for hate crimes being referred. You'll also see the statistic there on hate crimes filed. And so let me speak to that. It was in 2019 that District Attorney Dinah Becton decided that we would form a hate crimes committee. And it was going to be a committee of experience within our office of individuals of different backgrounds, race, identity, orientation, and experience, who would collectively review cases that came into our office in order to make filing determinations and potentially find cases in which there was a hate epithet or hate incident, which was part of the report that may have been missed and not labeled or identified at the time it was presented to us. That hate crimes committee has expanded to include now training for law enforcement, training in schools and in community, as well as guidance to our prosecutors who are then litigating these cases on some complex and nuanced issues that are different from our general assaultive crimes that transpire. As the hate crime committee reviews those cases, we take into account several factors, which I'll outline in greater detail. But one of the things that is important for us is a litmus test and a criteria that we'll go into, which helps us make a determination as to whether we have a hate crime, a hate incident, or a crime that can be filed and prosecuted, but not filed specifically as a hate crime. And while these referrals that you see in red were cases that came in for prosecution, not all of them, while they were all filed as crimes, not all of them received a hate crime enhancement or a hate crime charge. A few aspects that we look at is whether or not there was a pre-existing relationship between the parties. It is more likely that if individuals are strangers to one another and that there is no prior history between them, that this is more likely a hate crime, and that's one of the factors we'll look at. Another equally important attribute that our hate crimes committee will examine through the course of the investigation is what was the rising incident that gave way to the crime itself. Let's say, for instance, an individual was assaulted. Was there any engagement between the two parties before the crime happened? For instance, were two individuals driving down the roadway and somebody felt they off, and so they began to follow one another, and there was a road rage incident before the two parties ever stepped out of a car and could see potentially a different ethnicity or race than themselves. And that's an important aspect for us to look at as well. The absence of a rising incident leading to the offense, again, weighs in favor of that being a hate crime. And then another aspect that we'll look at is whether or not there was another crime committed in addition to the hate crime. This can be a complexity to the case and doesn't necessarily weigh one way or the other. But for instance, if there is a sexual assault of an individual who identifies as LGBTQ, and there was no other crime committed other than the sexual assault against her by a group of individuals, it's far more likely that this was directed towards her based upon a bias. Or conversely, there could have been a robbery where somebody was a victim and target of opportunity because they happened to be walking down the street in an unlit area. And they were targeted because they were alone, not because of their sexual orientation that may not have been known to the perpetrator. And so these are some of the factors that we'll evaluate and look at within our committee and then make a recommendation for whether or not the crime will be filed as a hate crime in addition to the other substantive offense. Next slide, please. As I touched on, there are a number of hurdles to hate crime prosecution. And the first being that not everybody feels comfortable coming forward and reporting these crimes. Our prosecutors and law enforcement partners recognize that it's important to ask open-ended questions and to become informed. As I tell newer prosecutors who are responsible for then working closely with victims of those crimes, one needs to act with humility and an awareness that they can't make presumptions in order to make people feel comfortable. If we could just click 4 times through, we'll get to the next 4 aspects that are perfect. Misidentification often can be an issue in any case of prosecution. We know from the research on implicit bias that people who are making identifications of different ethnicities and nationalities can be mistaken due to their own bias. Unfortunately, in a number of hate crimes cases that we've reviewed, there are issues of self-defense where 2 individuals who know each other, who have pre-existing history, engage in mutual combat. And as sort of a race to the lowest common denominator, slurs are exchanged between those 2 individuals. Both parties report to the police that the other was the aggressor and that they were the victim of that offense and also a victim of a hate crime. Those issues can be complex in any case of assault in which both individuals engage, but even more so in the area of hate crimes. And then finally, probably the most significant for us is insufficient evidence of bias. In order to prove a hate crime beyond a reasonable doubt, the offense itself, whether it's a robbery, a sexual assault, or a battery assaultive crime, has to be substantially motivated by bias. And I'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please. So this is the jury instruction that's given in the state of California anytime that a hate crime is alleged. And it reads as follows: the defendant acted in whole or part because of that actual or perceived characteristic. That's what I discussed from Penal Code Section 422.55. Bias against that person's, whether that protected characteristic is disability or sexual orientation, must have been the motivating cause for the defendant to commit that act. And so the defense oftentimes is that which I described, that the individual had a superseding reason for the assault. The example I gave of the road rage, defendant would say it wasn't because that individual was a person of color. It was because they cut me off, they flipped me off, and that's the reason I assaulted them. Because of the punishments that go with hate crimes, oftentimes the defense will concede the incident itself as the underlying crime, but challenge the hate crime. Next slide, please. So some of the factors that we'll utilize in order to establish bias will be a law enforcement custodial interview of that individual, and whether or not the individual will admit that they harbor bias. And we have seen from hate groups and individuals who freely identify and hold themselves out to be members of hate groups that they will pridefully admit to bias. We'll also use prior bad acts and crimes where somebody has previously committed an assault against somebody who was a protected class in order to establish that this was not an incident in which they were acting for a reason outside of that protected class. Oftentimes, racial epithets and hate speech is used contemporaneous to the crime. That is always of importance. And then finally, the absence of other motivation for the crime. Again, if they have no pre-existing relationship, they were strangers to one another, and there was no rising action that gave lead to the crime itself, sometimes the absence of evidence is just as important as the existence of evidence. Next slide.
Simon, we have 1 more minute, please.
1 more minute. Thank you, Mary, for keeping me on time. The last thing I want to address is that our state legislature just last year, and local assembly member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan was the author and instrumental in changing one of our penal codes on hate crimes, and that's hate symbols. Penal Code section 11411. And those hate symbols are nooses, swastikas, and burning crosses. And there was a disparity in how those crimes could be punished. Some of them could only be a misdemeanor, others were a wobbler. And there was also some incongruence between whether or not burning a cross on public property versus private property was a crime. And Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan uniformed those. And so each 3 instances of hate symbols are now wobbler offenses, which can be filed as felonies in appropriate circumstances and include both private and public property. I look forward to the Q&A to follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Simon. And as a reminder, if you have questions for Simon after all of our presentations, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions about the prosecutor's office, perhaps from Simon, about Simon, or for Becky, if you have questions about the California versus hate or the Civil Rights Department, you can ask those questions in Q&A, and we will ask them to respond to those after our next speaker, who is my police chief, Jamie Knox of Walnut Creek. Jamie Knox was appointed chief of police in Walnut Creek in July of 2021, becoming the city's 12th police chief. Chief Knox has over 28 years of law enforcement experience and is an accomplished police executive. He's worked many assignments in his career, including patrol, field training officer, K-9 officer, SWAT, honor guard, detectives, and also internal affairs. He's moved up the ranks throughout his career to command a variety of these assignments. Chief Knox is a member of the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing and has served as an adjunct faculty member at 3 higher educational institutes. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Emergency Management and a Master of Science degree in Organizational Leadership. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and the Senior Manager or the Senior Management Institute for Police in Boston, Massachusetts. Please welcome Chief Jamie Knox.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Mary, for having me and for moderating and policing Simon's time. He's always a tough act to follow. And I'll wait till the slide deck gets prompted here. Thank you. All right. Well, my name is Jamie Knox. I'm the Chief of Police for Walnut Creek, as Mary had mentioned, and it's a pleasure to be here. If you could advance to the next slide. I know we're on a bit of a time crunch here. I did want to mention one thing. So Simon had mentioned that we are 99% the same, and that's partially true. We're actually 99.9% the same based on our DNA makeup. So really our differences account for 1/10 of 1%. And it's interesting, in today's society, it seems that there are some people who spend 99% of their time thinking about that 1/10 of 1%, which is unfortunate. And this sparks the conversation today. So just a brief overview on hate crime statistics in the city of Walnut Creek. So this is for the last 5 years, and we included 2023 year to date. Actually, it was through May 1st. So when we originally ran this report, we actually got a very high number, which was alarming to me. This is the 5th city that I've worked in, 4 cities as a manager. So relatively, where you expect a relatively much lower number than we initially received, but my staff was including the hate incidents. So we parsed both of those out separately. And you can see we have a relatively low number of hate crimes. Ideally, it would be 0, but that's not the world we live in. Next slide, please. And then this is a hate crime summary just by type. So you can see a majority of them are assault related. Next slide, please. So we have a lot more hate incidents, and this is a good thing because police departments typically haven't always documented hate incidents, or any incident for that matter, that didn't result or constitute a crime, because for years we just didn't feel that it was worthwhile in documenting something that wouldn't be prosecuted. Well, now we know that hate incidents are often a precursor to crimes. So we actually have a specific policy on hate crimes and hate incidents that direct officers to document all hate incidents and hate crimes. Next slide, please. And then this is just a summary of the hate-related incidents and the types. So there is a distinction that Simon had mentioned on a hate incident, or what would actually constitute a crime. Based on my experience, some police agencies misreport hate crimes, and I think Becky had mentioned that it's underreported. And in fact, if you survey the community, a lot more people have that lived experience of hate incidents. So I think we need a little bit need to do a little bit better job of reporting. It would be nice if we could actually have a conduit to report hate-related incidents too, because I think the data is important and it's going to prompt better legislation moving forward. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of our department. We have 2 divisions under the Chief of Police, and that's the Administrative Division and the Operations Division. So patrol would initially receive a call of a hate crime or a hate incident, and then but we do have a hate incident and hate crime coordinator, and that's the investigations lieutenant. And I apologize, this slide's just a month out of date. We had a staff change. So our new investigations lieutenant, who's our hate crime coordinator, is Lieutenant Drew Olson. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of leadership in policing and the importance of diversity in policing. So based on research, diversity in a police force certainly increases the public's trust and our legitimacy in the public's eyes. And based on other research, victims of crimes are much more likely to report being a victim if an officer is from the same minority group. And there's also studies that indicate that females and LGBTQ, especially gay men, are much more empathetic to victims of domestic violence and hate crimes. Next slide, please. Wanted to spend a moment just talking about our department demographics, because I think this would surprise people. So we have a very educated department, which I'm very proud of. 76% of our staff have a college degree. We have 64% of our staff are male, 36 female. If you look at sworn ranks, that changes quite a bit. We're really working hard to recruit more females in our ranks. And then, of course, there's an overview of our diversity as far as race goes on our staff. Next slide, please. And then our leadership demographics, and I looked at, this is leadership across the organization. from sergeants and non-sworn supervisory staff up to me. And so the diversity is very similar as far as race goes, gender a little bit different. We definitely want to promote more females and get more diversity in our leadership team, because we feel that it's important as we develop policies and listen to the community and develop our strategy for policing. And I'm very proud to say that 14% of our leadership staff is part of the LGBTQ community, which we have a very big cross-section of our community in Walnut Creek that is part of that. And then last year we created a police patch that is representative of that community, and you may see some officers wearing that during the month of June. Next slide, please. So when I first started here, I was here for less than a month, and prior to getting here, the FBI asked me to participate in a one-day leadership summit that was held in Dallas, Texas. And basically, if you look at that photograph, it's kind of a Where's Waldo moment. If you could see me, I'm in the bottom right corner, but everybody there represents a different minority group across the country. It's top law enforcement officials from the US. And we just had a conversation about what we could do to combat hate crime and to bridge or to create bridges and build trust with various communities, underserved, underrepresented communities, communities of color, communities from the LGBTQ community. And it's prompted a conversation. We have a lot more work to do. The nice thing is now we have a commitment from the federal government to provide resources and to pick up the phone when we call them and ask for help. So I'm really pleased to be part of that program. Next slide, please. So we just developed a 3-year strategic plan. We have 6 focal points of that plan. 3 are very external, and then 3 are internal, working on things like culture. One of those things related to our culture is our recruitment, hiring, and retention. The 3 most important things I can do as a chief is 1, who I hire, 2, who I promote, and 3, who I fire. So we are committed to make sure that we are accountable to the public, but we're also committed to be very, very intentional in who we recruit and make sure that we recruit the right candidates who understand the importance and value of diversity. And of course, if we can get more candidates to be more representative of our community, not just the community that lives here, but the community that visits here, because if you've been in downtown Walnut Creek, you would know that it's extremely diverse, much more diverse than our residents here. Next slide, please. And we do have a Chiefs Advisory Board. It's very diverse. I won't read our mission statement there. You can read it on your own if you'd like, but we meet once a month, and our board brings issues to me that they feel need to be addressed. So we have that direct access to the community. And we do various other community events too. Coffee with a Cop. We do, National Night Out. We'll be facilitating some town halls in the future, but we would welcome people to come share their ideas and ways that we could create a safer community. As they say, it does take a village, so it's really up to all of us to, create a safe environment for everybody. And we do need to encourage people to report hate incidents and hate crimes, whether it's to the police department or through the new website that was just stood up a week or so ago, which is great. It's good to live in California. I'm glad I don't live in other states. I won't mention any names, but try to keep it brief. Oh, Simon did mention that we do, that I would cover how we investigate hate crimes. So yes, we do have a policy, and we also have a checklist that officers use, and we would ask specific questions on whether or not the victim felt that there was a perceived bias or an actual bias. They would also investigate that when interviewing a suspect or suspects. And we would also determine the reason for the bias and if there was any gang affiliation. Maybe there was a hate tattoo that the suspect had. So we would document all of that. If it was a vandalism related to a faith-based institution, for example, we would document that, take photographs of everything. So we have a very robust policy, and we do provide training to our officers, but this is an ongoing mission that we will certainly keep in the forefront of our vision to creating a safe environment for everybody. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mary, because I know we're in a time crunch.
Okay, so thank you very, very much, Chief Knox. And I don't think we've had any questions come in, but I guess it's good news for you all. I have questions for each of you. So I think they're going to bring up all of our panelists. If you would turn on your camera so everybody can see your beautiful and handsome faces there, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question for Becky. Again, excited about the California versus hate program. And as Chief Knox said, you know, he's hoping that people will report either there or, you know, locally. So, I mean, your program seems very attractive for people. So does that information flow to the county or to the local city?
That's a great question. And I think only if the person wants it to. So what I would say is, you know, when people call in, we let them know what their options are. And sometimes people call in and they want to file with law enforcement, but they want to know what the process could be like, you know, what will happen. And so we can give them an overview generally of what will happen. It sounds like if you're lucky to be in Walnut Creek, you can have it, you know, you will know that there's somebody who's assigned who focuses on hate crimes. That's not true in every department. It's also not true that every county attorney has someone who's focused on hate crimes in that hate crimes unit. But we would, so if people want to, we will help them to understand that process. But we also know that some people just don't feel safe yet going to law enforcement. There is, and I think the chief mentioned this, there's a pretty big overlap between communities targeted for hate and communities that may not trust law enforcement. And our job is to kind of meet the community where they are. We believe, and I think this, you know, I've had the chance to work with training with law enforcement. I work with the Matthew Shepard Foundation. We do training through that. I have had the chance to sort of see that I think over time, if we help as a government agency connect people with resources, we will help to build trust that ultimately long-term will help people feel more safe reporting to law enforcement to others. But for now, if you report to us, it stays with us unless you ask to be helped to be connected. And the other thing I just have to say, it's so exciting to hear more departments capturing hate incident data by policy. If you look at, you know, some of the leading, like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, their model policy recommends that people capture, that the departments capture incident data. So it's great to see that happening in Walnut Creek, and our hope is that will happen more broadly. And, you know, we'd love to get to a place where we can help to capture incident data as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And speaking of people perhaps not being comfortable reporting to police, Simon O'Connell, we know that we've had an issue in our county in one of our cities. Could you perhaps address that for us? I'm talking about Antioch.
Sure, Mary. Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, part of talking about hate crimes is talking about uncomfortable situations and trying to make those more comfortable, because it's the only way we get better. The prosecutor's office and law enforcement across this county is absolutely appalled by the devastating news that has come out of Antioch involving police officers using derogatory hate speech towards their community. It's not tolerated, and it is something that further divides communities. And unfortunately, all the hard work that Becky speaks of gaining trust, and as Chief Knox spoke of being in community and demonstrating solidarity, can be eroded in the blink of an eye. And the only way to get better is to hold those individuals who are accountable, responsible for that. That's the duty of the prosecutor's office to do so. And I thank you for bringing that up, Mary. It's not an issue I expected to discuss today, but it's an important one for us all to recognize, acknowledge, and hold one another accountable.
Okay, thank you very much. And, you know, I teach at DE&I courses. And so one of the things I do is I talk about, rather than difficult conversations, courageous conversations, because I think that perhaps put a little bit different spin on it. But thank you so much, Simon. Okay,
I'm going to adopt that, Mary. I'm going to adopt that, courageous conversations. Thank you. That's a takeaway for me.
Okay, all right. I won't bill you for it either. Okay, so Chief Knox, you are up next. Question is, do you have language experts who can help with non-English speakers who might report a hate crime?
Yes, we do. We do have language line services that we subscribe to that's available to dispatch and field units. But we also have a lot of bilingual officers and professional staff here. So sometimes in person, it's a little bit better if you can. Obviously, there's a lot of different cultures out there and different languages spoken. And with you know, a relatively small department, we utilize language line services when we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And so I'll follow up with another question for you, Chief Knox. The question is, what is the city doing to keep the community safe? What programs do they have addressing discrimination or issues? And what reforms are they looking to implement?
Oh, that's a lot. Well, I think
That was not me. That was one of our viewers. So go ahead.
Well, I'll just talk about culture. So culture starts from the top down. So my job as a police chief is to challenge my staff to be better the next day, to audit our policies and our practices to make sure that, you know, one thing I say is just because it's common practice doesn't mean it's best practice. So we really need to be looking with a critical eye at how we police our communities and what the expectations are. When it comes to that, first of all, the city as a whole, Walnut Creek, has made a lot of progress just over the last couple of years that I've been here at DEI training and bias training. Obviously, in the police department, we go a step further just because of the type of interactions we have. So we do focus on bias-based policing training. There's some requirements at the state level that you provide bias-based policing training once every 5 years. That's not very often. So we're trying to be a little bit more proactive in how we do that, and always looking for innovative ways that we can bring that to light and just have that conversation. But at the end of the day, it's just about culture. And as a city, we take a zero tolerance to policy to hate. And we really encourage people to report as much as they can. And the more we vocalize, and I think I mentioned this in the chat, the more we vocalize that we will not tolerate hate and that people will call the police or seek other resources to hold people accountable, my hope is that it would you know, root those people out or dissuade them from taking action that's based on hate.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have another question from our audience for Simon. Is there a county education initiative, to inform students and the general public regarding the Commission on the State of Hate and the resources they can utilize?
On the commission, there you go. Thank you so much. On the Commission of State of Hate, no. Becky may be a better responder for that. And I saw her hand go up. Take it away, Becky.
Okay.
Oh, just on the commission part. On the other part, I want to hear from you, but on the commission, I would, so, you know, on the Commission on the State of Hate, again, it's a new commission. We've just was put into effect late last year. You can go and we will, when Mary provides the resources afterwards, I'll make sure you have a link so you can find out how to kind of call in. You can provide comments. It is a community forum, so we are expecting people to weigh in. So the commission is also looking at things like the chief was talking about. What could training look like? What could roll call videos look like that could help to improve responses to hate? But in terms of education and working with young people, one of the things I wanted to highlight, we at the California versus Hate are working with API Youth Rising, which you may have heard of. You know, it was started by somebody, Mina Fedor, who's a junior high student in Northern California, that then started a nationwide effort to combat anti-Asian hate. We are also working with the Black Youth Leadership Project, which works on a lot of different forms of discrimination targeting Black students. So we are, through California versus Hate, working on getting resources out. I will also share, when we share the resources later, if you go to cavshate.org, you can find under partnership link, there's resources that that maybe the artwork we've worked with a lot with younger people to make sure it's accessible and helpful. So I would just point out those organizations as well. And we are working to sort of think about how do we do a more effective job of reaching young people. So I just put all of that out there, but I think it's a great question. And I think it's it's an important one for us to consider when we think about both responding and prevention.
Okay, thank you.
And Mary, I'll follow up on the heels of what Becky shared. You know, I often have these conversations with Chief of Police, just like Chief Knox, about the expectation of communities that, you know, the police and the district attorney's office do more than just find individuals who are responsible for crimes and punish them. But we also make efforts to reduce crime and educate our community. And District Attorney Dinah Becton and her administration is completely behind that as well. We have a robust outreach committee beyond just what I'm talking about with our hate crimes committee, as well as programs within high schools and junior high schools, where not only attorneys from our office, but administrative support, investigators, and our comfort dog Bear, who's probably the most important prosecutor in our office because he's such a popular request. Everywhere we go to, they say, I don't mind who the attorney is, but can you bring Bear the comfort dog? And if there is a school that wants us there, we'll be there. If there's a presentation on a subject matter, we'll be there. It was just a month and a half ago, we were out actually at a high school in Antioch, and I was blown away by the enthusiasm of their law society. The questions that 15 and 16-year-olds were asking about the Constitution, about law enforcement, about how to make communities better. So if there is a place that you'd like us to be, just say the word and we'll be there.
Okay, thank you so very much. And Becky, I have a question for you. I know that you had a partial answer on that last one, but you talked about the conflict resolution team that you all have. So I'm curious, do you also do any training for any community groups or organizations?
Yes, we do. And part of the Community Conflict Resolution Unit's sort of mission is to make sure that people in communities have the tools to address these issues, you know, without government. So we do, and we are still, the unit is very new, so we're still standing up all of the trainings, but some of the trainings might include de-escalation training for people, not for law enforcement, but for people who are in community. Maybe you're, we've heard a lot about sort of bystander or upstander training. De-escalation training is sort of connected to that. So some of those resources. We can also provide training on how, for example, when you're planning an effective community meeting, I think people often think you just schedule the meeting and go to it. And if you don't do the pre-work, then it's really hard to make those meetings turn into sort of longstanding systemic changes, which they can. Like I've seen that when I was at the Federal Community Relations Service. We would work with the communities in the aftermath of horrific acts of hate, where the community felt incredibly hurt and scared and unheard. And if done correctly, working with community leaders who are willing to sort of come to the table, you can set up sessions where people provide feedback about specific questions, and that can lead to actionable items that then people can be held accountable to. So we absolutely do provide those trainings. Thank you for the question. And we, you know, we call it community conflict resolution and community mediation. It really is recognizing, I think, as Simon mentioned, acts of hate do not just impact one individual, they really do terrorize entire communities. And so that's partly why we always bring this resource up in this context. We want to work with communities that are interested in sort of, you know, helping to address the broader impact. So yes, we do training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And this question is from our audience, and I will just ask it. Anybody can answer it. Have you looked into underreporting? Many women do not report sexual harassment, and many Asians don't report as well. And also many immigrants would not report either. And they're asking, are there any statistics on these? So I don't know who'd like to take that.
I can start the conversation. As far as sexual harassment, that's a whole different thing. Usually that happens in the workplace. If it's some sort of assault in nature, or somebody was groped while they were being restrained, then that's a crime. It's not harassment, it's a crime, and we want people to call us. Underreporting is a huge problem, especially the more diverse community you have, because some cultures have police corruption unlike anything that even we've seen. I worked in a community where 30% of the residents were of Asian descent, and many of them came from countries that had zero trust for the police because of all the corruption. So they were trained from a very young age to never call the police, even when there's violence in the household. So it's a real problem. And it's even though we look at other places around the world that might have those issues, it's a problem here because of people who have immigrated here. And if you look at the makeup of the Bay Area, it's one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse in the country.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could I,
And then,
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to reference one more source of data, if that's helpful. I think to the chief's earlier point about a lot of departments aren't collecting incident data, and there's no one place right now for incidents to be shared. Other groups are trying to fill that void. So if you look at NGOs like Stop API Hate, the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are some sources of data there. And I'll just cite a couple of points. Stop API Hate has been collecting hate incident data. And if you look, for example, for 2 years, they had between March 19th of 2020 and March of 2022, they had over 11,500 incidents reported. So that's just Asian American incidents. That's across the country, but that is significant when if you go back to thinking about sort of what overall hate crimes are actually reported and hate incidents are reported. And then the other piece I would just point to, and I think my former colleagues at the US DOJ would say this as well. If you look at the data that we have about what's reported to law enforcement and what law enforcement reports, again, maybe you'll get to 10,000 hate crimes a year under the Uniform Crime Reporting. But if you look at the Bureau of Justice Statistics National Crime Victimization Survey, and I'm just going to say I did not throw out every acronym like I usually do. I'm watching myself, but the NCVS data, which is the National Crime Victimization Survey data, estimates closer to 250,000. So that data point should be something we all hold, and that's nationally, but we know that that would apply in our state likely as well. And that's the issue around immigrants fearing reporting. Really, any community that has been targeted for hate has often experienced discrimination at the hands of law enforcement. That's why we have the resource line the way we have it, that you can connect later. We do believe we can build that trust. I have worked with departments across the country. They can do that, but we have to earn it. So I think just a few things, especially on the immigration point, we make it very clear. You don't have to, people can report regardless of immigration status, and we will not share that information.
okay, thank you very much. Another question from our audience, and I think this might be about prosecution. It says there was a sexual assault of a mixed race teen a couple of years ago. The suspect had posted racist comments online prior to the assault. Is the punishment for assault more severe with the element of racism?
So as lawyers get paid the big bucks to say it depends, right? So to begin with, do we have an underlying crime of sexual assault? And sexual assault does carry a larger penalty than a hate crime, which is charged on its own. California's penal code also has hate crime enhancements, which can be added. An enhancement is something that is added to a substantive charge. A common example outside the conversation of hate crimes, if I commit a robbery and I use a handgun, the substantive crime is the robbery and the enhancement is the firearm that I used along with it. In the context of a sexual assault, if that was motivated by that bias towards that individual, it has an enhancement that can go with it. Oftentimes, that enhancement will be something that is negotiated away when it comes time and taking into consideration the survivor's feelings about going forward with that trial. Do they want to be re-victimized, subject to cross-examination? Do they want their identity to become publicly known through that course of that trial? And so these are all sensitive issues that go into that crime. Just in the strictest sense, yes, a crime that is committed with bias as a substantial motivation is more serious than that crime alone. If the question was what carries a greater punishment, a hate crime or a sexual assault like rape, it's the sexual assault.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. And Chief Knox, there's a question for you. What kind of coordination do you have with the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office on addressing hate crimes?
Yeah, we share ideas and coordinate on a variety of different issues among all of the police chiefs and the sheriff, but it's important for the community to know that we are our own entity. And if we investigate something here, we don't necessarily have to go to the sheriff's department. We have jurisdiction in the city of Walnut Creek. So my fundamental responsibility is to this community, and usually the sheriff's department doesn't get involved unless it's something that's within their purview, like a coroner's case or something to that effect. So we are an independent entity of the sheriff's department, but we do share ideas and information on a variety of topics.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, any of you can answer this, I would suppose. How would you define a racist remark? Does it need to be an aggressive remark, or could it be those people?
So I think it would just be that a racist remark. You know, we may document that as a hate-related incident. It might need a little bit more context. But for it to be a crime, it's a little bit more nuanced. There needs to be something a little bit more than that. It can certainly be hate speech, though. You know, over a decade ago, there probably wasn't a defining line on something. You know, if you look at the legislation that has been passed just over the last 10 years in California, we are moving more towards a zero tolerance for hate in general. Doesn't necessarily have to constitute a crime for law enforcement or other authorities to get involved, and that's the important thing. But yeah, I think it's important if you do hear a racist remark or someone referring to those people, challenge them. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? That's up to all of us.
Okay, and on that note, I would invite each of you to just give a 1 minute response to this question. What can we as citizens do to prevent hate crimes in our community?
I'm happy to take this one first. Embrace one another. And to Chief Knox's comment earlier, if I'm with somebody who makes a comment in the privacy towards me, let them know that's harmful too. And redirect conversations when somebody thinks they're in a space where a perceived class that's protected, it is not in earshot or is not viewing that message. And don't be an individual who says to themselves, I personally I'm not an individual who's biased. I'm not somebody who believes that way, but allow it tacitly to carry on. And I think that is a huge step that you can be in order to be anti-racist. And also make every effort to be inclusive in as many relationships as you can.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Becky or Jamie Knox?
I would definitely echo that. What I would say, a couple of things. One is not only, if you see an act of hate or if you see someone being targeted for hate, as Simon said, you do need to speak up. And part of it is, I still remember I was working with a Muslim student who had been targeted for a series of sort of hateful acts at her school. And she said one of the hardest things for her was she would be in a classroom and she would hear it and she would look around and no one would say anything. And what she said is, and I was talking to her in a couple of years after this started happening. She said, now I maybe can understand that people were scared. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. But in that moment, what I heard in the silence was that they all agreed. And so I do think that when you have the ability, and whether it's, in public or in private, you should speak up. The other thing, very concretely, please go to cavshate.org. And there are partner resources. There are, easy things you can post on social media. There are ways that you can reach out and let people know if they need support, they can get it. Making sure we are there for people who are victims to give them the service and the support that they want. That is a huge thing you can do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Knox?
Yeah, I would echo all of that. And what Becky's talking about is pluralistic ignorance, and that's a real thing. And your silence is basically tacit approval. And I love that Simon used the word embrace. I can't stand the word tolerance. I think it suggests that, I mean, you would tolerate a mosquito or a fly at a picnic or something. To say that you would tolerate someone from a different race or a different sexual orientation just comes with a whole host of problems. We need to get away from that as a society and say, no, I embrace you. And I recognize that you're unique and you contribute something different to society with your life experience and your different perspectives. So we need to move more towards that. And then Mary, I think you had mentioned earlier, to be courageous or bold. And I think that's up to all of us to be courageous and hold people accountable, whatever form that takes, whether it's, talking with someone else that may be an intermediate person. But we're actually embracing that as part of our culture with a program called Active Bystandership in Law Enforcement, which is all about intervening and teaching our officers it's okay to pull an officer aside and say, hey, you seem upset, or, I got this call, I'll handle this call. And likewise, we're going to teach our officers that it's okay to relinquish that call to someone else. It's okay to take a step back. So the more we inculcate people into that sort of culture of emotional intelligence and self-awareness and moving away from pluralistic ignorance, then we're going to get to the place where we need to go.
Okay, thank you all so very much. That ends our Q&A. Diane, were you going to?
Yes, I am.
Here's some
On behalf of the
information.
Community Conversation Team, I want to thank Mary Taylor for her excellent moderation of this webinar. Mary is a native of Phoenix, Arizona, a graduate of Louisiana State University with graduate level studies in organizational development and coaching certification. She is the author of Bridging to Joy, a motivational, results-oriented book supporting the reader in achieving greater success. She is now a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, as well as advocating for social and racial justice. Mary resides in Walnut Creek, where she's an active volunteer in her community. She is the founder of the Rossmore Black Lives Matter Committee that sponsors programming and racial equity training, part of the African American and Friends Club. She's a member of the City of Walnut Creek Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And Mary received the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center 2021 Local Hero for Peace Award. Mary, I will turn it back to you for closing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Diablo Valley, the League of Women Voters, West Contra Costa County Library, and CCTV, I want to extend a genuine thank you to each of our panelists for being here today to offer such an informative and timely conversation about our webinar, Standing Up to Hate in California. Did I not tell you they were outstanding? I came through on that, I think, because they were just amazing. So I'd like to thank each of them. So Becky L. Moore, Deputy Director for Strategic Initiatives and External Affairs. Simon O'Connell, Chief Assistant District Attorney for our own Contra Costa County. And Chief Jamie Knox, Chief of Police for Walnut Creek. I also want to thank our audience for attending today and for their important questions. This community conversation, Standing Up Against Hate, is being rebroadcast on CCTV on the following dates and times. Our next community conversation will take place on September the 21st at 4 p.m. We will announce the topic this summer, so stay tuned. I think I missed a slide, sorry. This community conversation is also available on the YouTube channels of the League of Women Voters, Diablo Valley, and the Contra Costa County Library. Community conversations programs are a partnership between the League of Women Voters, Diablo Valley, and the League of Women Voters, West Contra Costa County, the Contra Costa County Library, and CCTV. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. The League never endorses or opposes candidates or political parties. We influence public policy through education and advocacy. We invite community members to join the league and support the work we do. Again, thank you all so very, very much. Each of our panelists, great job. Thank you so much for your information, your insight. We're so much more knowledgeable than when we joined this call. So wishing everybody a fabulous evening, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you.
Thank you.